did she decide that this was the time to finally clean out that old briefcase? It wasn't on her to-do list. She wasn't coming out of retirement. It's not like she was getting a job and needed to use it. It hadn't been in the way for the last 8 years. It had been tucked away in a closet, not hurting anyone. But for some reason, maybe it was similar to that voice that roused Samuel from his sleep. For some reason, she decided to clean it out. Well, truth be told, maybe she did have an inkling as to why she needed to clean out that briefcase. Just a few weeks earlier, she had received the worst news of her life. After months of running into walls and falling for no reason, after months of watching her hands tremble, her doctor finally told her why. Parkinson's disease. Something was going wrong in her brain, and her body would never again obey her. Her shaking would get worse. She would fall more often. She would want to turn right, but her brain would turn her left, right into that wall again. It's altogether likely she decided to clean out that briefcase because even though she probably had years of life left, this new diagnosis felt like a death sentence. She might as well start setting her affairs in order. And that included cleaning out the old bank statements and rent receipts that she'd shoved in there so many years before. But when she opened that briefcase, she found something in addition to those old papers, something she wasn't expecting. Inside the briefcase, there was a Bible. She didn't remember buying that Bible, let alone putting it in there. In fact, after how she had been treated by her church, she was surprised there was anything left in her life that would remind her of Christianity. She had not woken up one morning and decided to be gay. As much as she tried to change like her church wanted her to, she was who she was. She was who God created her to be. She was gay. When they gave her that ultimatum, leave your wife or be excommunicated, she knew that she could not suddenly figure out how to be straight. It wasn't going to happen. She could not deny who she was. So they kicked her out and told her she was going to hell. 8 years later, there she was, sitting on the floor, staring into that briefcase. She picked up that Bible, held it in her hands, and for the first time in a very long time, she had an inexplicable and overwhelming clarity that she was not alone. God was right there with her. She felt a peace like she had never felt before. All the anger and all the hurt that she had felt over a group of humans telling her that God did not love her, all that anger and hurt were gone and replaced with the certainty that God loves her more than she could ever understand. For the first time in years, she stopped saying no to God, and God flooded her heart with everything good that she had ever needed. Maybe this was what Jesus was talking about with those angels ascending and descending. Talk about an epiphany. Now, we don't know what happened in Nathanael's life that caused him to keep saying no to God too. In fact, we don't really know much about him. Sorry, Nathanael, I did not mean to name you after this kind of grumpy disciple of Jesus. Nathanael actually means gift of God, and I figured number 3 had to be a gift of God, or he might not make it to 10. But he's 11, so that's a good thing. Anywho, back to Nathanael the disciple. We know that when Philip invited him to come follow Jesus, Nathanael didn't want anything to do with it. In fact, according to our reading, all we know about him before he met Jesus is that he was not a fan of Jesus' hometown Nazareth. When Philip extended that invitation to follow Jesus, Nathanael nearly spit out his answer. Can anything good come from Nazareth? Can anything good come from Cary, Illinois? What? That's my hometown. What? Philip may have been slowly backing away from Nathanael after that point, but he didn't give up. Come and see, he continued to invite. Once Nathanael met Jesus, we learn more about him, that he was an Israelite in whom there was no deceit. In other words, Nathanael was one of those people who always speaks the truth, which sounds like a good thing, right? And it can be, of course, but maybe he spoke it a little too much, a little too forcefully, a little too hurtfully. You know people like that. We all have been people like that, right? Maybe he was one of those people who used truth like a weapon, or like a high cement block wall to keep out those who would encourage him to remember that only God holds the real truth, and that we humans see truth through our imperfect eyes. We also learn that at one point in his life, Nathanael sat under a fig tree. Huh, interesting, right? Not really. What? What a random fact, right? Now, this is not the most important thing about Nathanael, but it does remind us of something that's very important, that Jesus is always with us, watching over us and guiding us, whether we like it or not, whether we're in a sanctuary or under a fig tree, right? Somehow finding out that Jesus knew these two things about him, that he was a truth teller and that he at one time sat under a fig tree, finding that out caused something to fall away from Nathanael's heart so that it could be filled with Jesus. So when Jesus invited him to be his disciple, Nathanael quickly said yes. I always shake my head at Jesus when one of the readings for Sunday lines up with something that happens in my life. By chance this week, I ran into the woman who'd found the Bible in her briefcase. I hadn't seen her in a couple of years. Call her Anne. I ran into her and she asked if she could share her story with me. Afterwards, it struck me that she was like Nathanael. Despite her reluctance, she had been called to follow Jesus too. Now, I'm sure Jesus had been asking Anne to follow him for a long time, every day of her life, but for some reason she needed that Bible at that time. It's like how Nathanael somehow needed Jesus to tell him he'd seen him under the fig tree. It was just the thing to shake off whatever had been covering his heart so that Jesus could fill it with his love and that Nathanael could say yes. In taking away the hurt and the anger, Anne's heart could finally be filled with peace and goodness and love and God. Here's what Anne wrote to me when I asked her if I could share her story with you. She wrote, "I was so broken inside when my church excommunicated me because I am gay. I was so mad at God. I believed I wasn't good enough in God's eyes. When I found that Bible, I realized it wasn't God who had shunned me. It was people who had. God never turned his back on me. It was me who walked away from God. And that knowledge made all the difference. I felt a peace inside my heart, and the anger just went away. God gave me the greatest gift of all, faith. With that, I can deal with the hardest thing I've ever faced, Parkinson's disease. I'm not afraid of it anymore. Whatever God has put in front of me, I won't be afraid. And that is an incredible blessing. A Bible in a briefcase, a fig tree, an invitation to come to church, a chance meeting with an old friend. I don't know what each of you here needs for your hearts to be full of God's love, but I know that God will never stop putting it there for you so that you can respond to Jesus' call to follow him. This week, may we all have epiphanies like we've never before experienced and that we've needed.